I am so utterly delighted to introduce Steve Chamberlain, who is one of the world's leading coaches in the field of purpose. As a former events director at the London Business Forum, working with thought leaders including Malcolm Gladwell and Sir Ken Robinson, Steve is now a performance coach with Ivy House, bringing life-changing learning to some of the UK's top emerging leaders. He works with private coaching clients, helping them discover what they are really here to do. And he's spoken within organisations including BBC Worldwide and the World Economic Forum. Steve also is the author of the wonderful book called On Purpose, which I will hold up here. And so Steve will be talking a bit about that this evening, or from that this evening, and we'll kind of tell you a bit more about that later. But Steve, without further ado, over to you. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Olivia, and for the kind introduction and for setting up this amazing group. I'm really excited to be here, to have the opportunity to talk about a subject that I'm really passionate about. And at a time when I'm sure we'll all agree, we need more than ever in this world, people who have a real clarity on who they are and what unique contribution we can make to help make this world a better place. So it's yeah, a real privilege to be here. And thanks, as you said, to everyone for giving up what I know is really precious time at the moment. So I'll do my very best to make sure that you step away feeling like you've got the most from your time. So you'll be glad to know there are not many slides, and I'm going to only start with slides, then I'm going to turn back to main screen. But I thought it would just be valuable to give a very quick kind of sense of the journey that we're briefly going to go on together. So this is the journey that we're going to take. So we're going to work our way up towards finding your purpose, which you'll see up here at the top. And we're going to go on a journey from how you uncover your values, your strengths, your passions, to find your element. And then there's a piece called, which I call vision, which then leads us up to the purpose. So that's the journey that we'll go on together. And I'll talk through briefly some ideas on how you can start the journey to getting clarity on each of these areas, which is a key part of finding your purpose. I'll then talk briefly around how you can then start to use that self-knowledge and that understanding of your values, your element and your purpose to apply it to your work life, your family life, and yeah, any aspect of your life. So what does it look and feel like to be living on purpose in very real terms? I'll then talk briefly about the book itself, but only very briefly, but it's just to give, if it kind of sparks your interest or you kind of get a sense that you'd like to explore further, I'll talk very briefly about what else is included within there. And then, as Olivia said, there's an opportunity for questions, and then we're going to go for breakouts. So that's it for slides. You'll be glad to know. So let's start this journey, and from that kind of build, the mountain slide that you saw, the first stage as I see it, and by the way, just to kind of frame this, by no means am I claiming that this is the one way to find your purpose. This is a journey, and it's a way of ascending that mountain, and it's not the only pathway up there by any stretch. Yet each of the pieces that we'll cover, typically if you speak to someone, first of all, you can find your purpose through this path, and also anyone who has found their purpose would be able to look back down the mountain and say, do you know what, it aligns with each of these pieces as well. So this is about bringing into your conscious awareness some of the pieces that are going to really help you to find your purpose, the unique contribution that you're here to make. So right at the bottom of the mountain is your values. So your values are the words that best describe what matters to you most at the very deepest level. So it could be things like values like integrity and growth, family, freedom, meaning, excellence, and on and on and on. Uncovering these values gives you a real sense of actually what is it that matters to me? What is it that needs to be honored in my life? And what is it that if I'm not honoring is just gonna, it actually would lead to some form of suffering for me. And the reason we start with that is because your purpose will absolutely require you to be completely true to who you are, and your values point towards who you are at that very deepest level. So how do we go about uncovering our values? If they're that important, then how do we go about uncovering them? Let me introduce you to the way not to do it, which is the way that I did it, which involved quite a lot of suffering along the way. So if you rewind back, I turned 41 in December, but if you rewind back about 15 years, and as Olivia said in the introduction, I had the privilege of working with the London Business Forum, doing some amazing events with some real thought leaders. Now that from the outside looked like a very shiny job. It paid well. It was a small company, so there was only 4 of us, and we were leading these big events with Richard Branson and Malcolm Gladwell, etc. So paid well, very prestigious, and right in an area of interest for me in terms of public, the psychology and human development. But I was struggling with quite a lot of stress in that role as an events director. I was getting up on stage and introducing speakers in front of big audiences, and there were definitely some ceiling limiting beliefs that were creating quite a lot of stress for me. But that was before I knew much about how this worked. So I thought, well, the job is creating the stress, so I need to get rid of, if I leave the job, then suddenly all the stress is going to completely drop away. So that is what I did. And actually, unknowingly, what I'd done was compromise my number 2 core value, which is growth. So growth is really important to me. I need to be growing, developing, evolving in my life. It really matters to me. I didn't know that was a value until I violated it. And I absolutely violated it in that moment. I'd stepped away from this huge growth opportunity without anything else to go to. If I'd gone to another opportunity that was a big growth opportunity, great, but I hadn't. I'd stepped away from it and stepped back. And I really suffered. I really remember like a walk with my dad around Hampstead Heath the day afterwards. And I thought before handing my notice in that I'd feel really happy and, a weight off my shoulders. And it was the complete opposite. So that then led to a period where I thought, right, okay, well, I'm going to, move into the field of psychology. That was the image that I had. I thought I'd become a psychologist because I had a psychology degree. But I was like a rabbit in the headlights, and I was I didn't quite have the energy to go towards it. I was all a bit afraid and driven by these fears. So I ended up actually going for a job back in the events industry, but now one that I wanted less than the one I'd left. And I actually ended up moving into the charity sector. And I remember lying in an interview saying that the reason I was going for that job is because I'd always wanted to work for that charity and make a real difference in that area, which wasn't true. It was a lie. Unknowingly, I was now compromising my number 1 core value, which is integrity, and the suffering cranked up to a whole new level. So I got the job and ended up working in events within the charity sector for a number of years, and did my very best and organized some big events and did help make money for those charities. But I was always feeling like I was a fraud. I always felt like I had a mask that I was putting on every day, and I really suffered and actually went through periods of stress, anxiety and depression during that period. At that time, if you'd asked me, to describe myself, I'd say, well, there's something wrong with me. I've got a faulty mind, or there's something wrong with my character. But what I hadn't realized, what I didn't know, was actually it was just that I was out of alignment with my values. And when you're out of alignment with your values, you suffer every single time. So that's how I started to uncover my values. If you can get away without doing that path, I would highly recommend it. So how can you uncover your values if you want to go a different way? I'll obviously introduce this briefly now, and I know we're going to make chapter 1 from the book available, even if you choose not to invest in the book itself. And within that chapter, this process that I'm talking through is mapped out really clearly for you, step by step. But very briefly, the way that you can do it is your values have played out for you in every single moment of your life that you've been through, in every situation, because you've brought yourself into every situation. So your values will have been playing out. So what you do is play detective, and you can look back over your life and map out your peak and your trough moments. The peaks, the times that you've thrived and you've absolutely loved what you've been doing, and the troughs, the times when you've suffered and it's felt really hard, or maybe times when other people have triggered you in some way. You've got quite angry or frustrated or whatever. And what you'll find is in the peaks, you will have been, even if you weren't aware of it at the time, aligned with at least one of your values. It's why it will have been such a high. You'll have been really loving that particular moment. And in the trough moments, it will have been because you or someone else was compromising or violating one of your core values. That would have been one of the key factors that's in there. So it's almost like playing detective. You go to the peaks, you go to the troughs, and you ask yourself, so what was present there? So for example, if you happen to have a core value of freedom, it's likely that some of your peak memories are travels that you've done, and times when you've been given freedom within your job role. So if you've worked in roles where you've been given freedom of responsibility and you can, real autonomy in the role, you'll probably have loved those, and that would have been amazing. Times when you got a micromanaging boss would have been absolutely a nightmare for you, even more so than for someone who doesn't have that particular value. And maybe, I don't know, you might even find that a 5-star luxury holiday somewhere actually wasn't, you struggled there. It was tough because you had to stay within the compound, maybe it was in Mexico or something, and you were told to stay there, and actually everyone else is loving it, but they've got different values, and you just wanted a backpack on, you wanted to get on the local bus and go and explore. So that's the way that you start to map out what your peak and your troughs might be. And what you'll find through that journey is there's something that I call the values principle, which is that every single time you are aligned with your values in your life, you have a peak experience. And every single time you or someone else is compromising or violating those values, it's a trough, it's a real challenge, and there's suffering there. And the fact that plays out without exception, for me, shows there's a principle at play. So what it means, that's great, gives you great clarity looking backwards, but going forwards in your life, you can then think, well, okay, if I align my life around my values, then I'm going to have many more of the peak experiences. And the further I stray away from my values, the more likely it is that it's going to feel effortful. It's going to feel struggle. It's going to be struggle, and there's probably going to be suffering once you get enough away from that line of your values. So you can kind of think of your values. The whole book talks through life as a journey, and you can think here about your values as your compass, completely unique to you. Your compass will be different to your partners, different to your parents, different to your friends, but it's your unique compass by which to guide and navigate your choices, actions, and decisions. And your purpose will absolutely be in alignment with your values. It will require you to be true to yourself, because that's where you make the biggest contribution. So that's the base of the mountain, and that takes us up almost to base camp, so to speak. The next stage is around surfacing your strengths and your passions. So strengths are the things that you are naturally good at. The things that you go, do you know what? I've always been good at that. It just, I may even be, sometimes we're often blind to our strengths because we just think, well, that's easy. Olivia, I would imagine for you, you don't have to answer this now, but I'd imagine for you, even as a child and through your teen years, probably connecting with other people, bringing people together, being the life and soul of a party, that would just be easy, and you maybe wouldn't even see it as a strength. But someone else would go, oh my God, like, how do you do that? How do you organize a group, and how do you get people together, and how do you feel comfortable doing that? Those are our strengths, and your purpose will require you to play to your strengths, because it's your natural, it's what you're naturally good at. And we do live in a strengths-obsessed society. The piece that's missing from that puzzle often is passions. So what is it that you are passionate about as well as what you are good at? And where those two intersect is what Sir Ken Robinson, again, someone we worked with at London Business Forum, who very sadly passed away last year, an amazing speaker, what he coined as the element. So the element is where your strengths and your passions intersect. And it's not that you have just one element, you are in your element whenever and wherever your strengths and passions intersect. But on your journey to purpose, and by the way, you may choose to never define your purpose in a sentence, but if you're living in alignment with your values, and if you are regularly living and working in your element, then that's the journey. That's an amazing place to be. You will love it. When you're in your element, time goes quickly. You could spend 2 hours doing something and it's just disappeared in the blink of an eye. Whereas when you're out of your element, you can spend 10 minutes, doing Excel spreadsheets for me, and it feels like 2 hours have gone by. So time flies by, your energy goes through the roof. You feel more energized by the time you've finished an activity, even if it's taken a couple of hours, than you were before you went into it. And you also find your tribe, so other people that are like you when you're playing and working in that kind of space. So again, there's an exercise around a strength surfacing tool that enables you to find your strengths, and also some questions to help you surface your passions. But those passions, you can ask yourself questions like, you know, what is it that I do that nobody pays me to do? I do it just because I love it. So, you know, looking at your Google search history, looking at your Netflix watches, looking at your bookshelf, and on, those are your clues for your passions. So living in alignment with your values, that piece of almost who you are at the deepest level, understanding your strengths, your passions, and your element where they intersect, and living and working there as regularly as you possibly can do. Then that enables us to go to the next stage, which is seeking purpose. So the stage that comes just before purpose, as I touched on earlier, is clarifying your vision. So your vision is, what is the world that I would love to inhabit? And I'm imagining for most of us, it's a long way away from the world we currently inhabit. But coming from a place of anything is possible, almost play God, you know, imagine that it's a new world and you can create it in your image. What would that world be? And the questions, again, these will be, actually, these would be in chapter 2, but feel free to ask me at the end for some of these questions. But the kind of questions that would be in there, or that you can ask yourself, is knowing that my values are and I'm in my element in these kind of areas. If anything was possible, what kind of world would I love to inhabit? And you can start to get a vision of the kind of world that for you is going to be unique and going to be an amazing world to live in. And again, going through the exercises, there's a piece here around everyone on the planet would love everyone to have clean running water. And everyone on the planet would love everyone to have access to healthcare and all of these kind of things. But that's not going to be everyone's vision statement. So the piece here is to think about actually thinking of my element and thinking of my values. What's the image of the world there that feels true for me? Something that feels like my purpose might sit underneath it. So you kind of stay in that space, you explore until you get a vision statement. And then once you've got that vision, which by the way is big picture, so we're talking unachievable in this lifetime and unachievable by you alone. So really big picture. This is your utopia. And then when you have that, you can drill underneath it and look for your purpose, which is your unique contribution that would contribute towards that kind of world becoming a reality. So when you're thinking there, now we're going actually down to the specifics of this is achievable by me and I can drive this. So just to play this out, because I know an example would be helpful. So my vision when I did this exercise, this was the exercise I created and went through to find my purpose. So my vision was of a world in which every single person has crystal clarity on who they are, what matters to them most, and what they're here to do. And they live their life on the line between who they are and what they're here to do. So that's the world I would love. That's my utopia, somewhere where everyone knows who I am, what I'm here to do, and we all live in that space. That would be a world way beyond the one we live in at the moment. Now, unachievable in my lifetime and unachievable by me alone, absolutely fulfills those two criteria. You know, that's a whole, you know, few generations, if not hundreds of generations away. But knowing that was my arena, that was the kind of world I was envisioning, enabled me to then say, okay, so what might my contribution be towards that kind of world? What's my purpose? So again, knowing my values, knowing my element, what's the unique contribution I can make? And for me, when I sat with that and played with it and explored, the answer came back. My purpose is to help people create and lead extraordinary, enlightened lives. So helping people to create and lead extraordinary, enlightened lives. Now that is broad enough to cover a lifetime of action. it covers this. What we're doing right now is bang on purpose for me. It covers, this morning I was working with Ivy House, as Olivia had mentioned, working with some senior leaders from Aviva and giving them some incredible life tools to become the leaders of tomorrow. It also, you know, I was on purpose when I was writing the book. That falls under that category, but also it's broad enough that I don't know what 5 years from now is going to look like, but I know it's going to be in that arena. It's going to be something to do with that. But it is also narrow enough that it lets me know where I'm not going to spend my time. So it kind of led me away from executive coaching. That executive coaching is hugely valuable and a huge, you know, you need huge skill to work in that area, but it just didn't quite feel right for me. So it gives me clarity to not pursue that, to not spend my time looking at that particular area. So that, in a nutshell, is the journey, the ascent, the mountain climb towards purpose. If you want a working purpose statement to play with, it is simply, your purpose is to live in perfect alignment with your values and in your element, so that you can add your unique value to the world in any given moment. That's your purpose. Be true to who you are, spend time where you thrive, and almost ask the world, what does the world need from me right now? And what does that look like for me in this particular moment? So you don't actually need to go the whole way to find a perfect purpose statement, but there's the option to do so if you feel like it would be valuable as well. But that's ultimately what we're here to do. So once we've got that understanding, how then do we live on the line? How do we live on purpose? And that image that I showed earlier was that the line is your values and your vision, and you draw the line between those two, and living on that line is living on purpose. You're being true to who you are, you're working towards a vision. You're not going to see it made realized in this lifetime, but you're working in that direction. It's like your North Star. Can't reach it, but it guides you. And in any given moment, you're plotting your life on the line. And you can start to ask yourself questions like, you know, right now, knowing my values and my purpose and the present circumstances of my life, what does that mean for what it feels like life wants from me right now? So that's going to look very different for many of us at this particular moment with a pandemic than it maybe would have done a couple of years ago, or hopefully a couple of years from now. So for me, you know, I've got 2 young kids. Suddenly, do you know what? It's no longer good. To be on purpose isn't spending loads of time away from the family and trying to do loads of stuff around promoting the book. Actually, I'm just as much on purpose if I'm sharing the homeschooling responsibilities and spending quality time with Jacob and Seren. So it really is this piece of, it's in the moment, you make conscious choices, but you've got the tools by which to make those conscious choices. You're using your values, you're using your element, you're using your vision, you're using your purpose, but you're also absolutely taking on board the present circumstances of your life. So that is the journey. The book itself, just again, I mentioned that I'd give a quick kind of overview of what else, because that's chapter 1 and 2 effectively. So chapter 1 is figuring out your values, and then chapter 2 takes you on the journey towards finding your element and your purpose. The journey from that point is, so 7 chapters in total. Now those 2 are really key, but actually there's so much more to it. So the journey is to live on purpose, but there's a lot that can get in the way of us living on purpose. And the number one thing that stops us from living on purpose is our belief system, because beliefs are just thoughts that we buy into. So, you know, if your purpose compelled you to go and speak in front of big audiences, it won't do for everyone. For many people, it's a local purpose. It's a purpose within their family or the local community. But if it happened to be a purpose that required public speaking, and you had the belief that I'm not good at public speaking, then it's game over straight away. You're never going to be able to fulfill your purpose. So chapter 3 starts to look at how the mind works and how we can start to free up limiting beliefs and replace them with empowering beliefs. Then the next stage is around mindfulness. So the piece that is really easy to lose sight of is when we're setting these goals, future focused goals about how I can be on purpose, it's really easy to fall into the trap that our happiness, our contentment lies once we've done X, Y, and Z a few years from now. But actually it's the ultimate trap, because as we know, you can only ever experience love, peace, joy, fulfillment, contentment, everything we're looking for here and now in the present moment. So mindfulness is the bridge. You absolutely envision a future now that is compelling, and you journey there, but you never step out of the present moment on the journey there. You're constantly evolving moment by moment, day by day. So mindfulness is that bridge. Then there's a piece around mindset. How do you step into unshakable self-worth and confidence? How do you up your skill set? And then the final chapter is around inner peace, contentment, and enlightenment. So how do we bring value through us into the world to experience all of those peak states? So Olivia, I feel like I have rambled and talked enough, but that's the overview. So I hope that's been helpful for everyone as a bit of an overview to start with.
Steve, thank you so much. Absolutely haven't rambled at all. I think it was really clear and just really lovely. The images that that you showed at the beginning, kind of that mountain, and just being able to see it visually and then kind of hear you talk it through each of the steps and kind of really bringing it to life is great. So thank you so much.